To the details of our stories now, the NPP is refusing to heed to pleas from sections of society for it to reconsider its MP's boycott of the vetting of ministers designate. The party took the decision after a meeting with the minority in Parliament and have so far stayed from proceedings of the Appointments Committee conducting the vetting. The GBA is one of several institutions and groups that have appealed to the NPP to rethink the decision in the interest of the state. The party, in a letter to GBA and copied to Joynews, however, insists its position remains unchanged.
The opposition NPP has been under pressure since the start of the year over its decision to boycott events associated with the Mahama administration. After boycotting the swearing-in of President Mahama and his vice, Papa Kwesi Mr. Arthur, the NPP is now boycotting the vetting of the president's nominees for various ministerial positions. Some religious bodies have called on the party to rescind its decision. Pro-NPP pressure group, the Alliance for Accountable Governance, AFAG, has also described the party's boycott of the vetting as a shame. Social media has also been flooded with comments urging the NPP to rescind its decision of boycotting the vetting of ministerial nominees, but the party will not budge.
There's a world of difference between boycotting the process and declining to participate in the process. For example, like as I said, we are declining to participate in the process of vetting the ministers that have been nominated or any other minister that will be nominated within the period that the Supreme Court will rule. Until such a time that the Supreme Court will rule, we will not do that. But if the president were to, for example, nominate a Supreme Court judge or any other person who will outlive his presidency, if the Supreme Court were to rule, would take part and vet that kind of person. So I said, for example, we are just not vetting, or we are not just engaging ourselves in acts that the president, that will cease to exist when the president is no more president by the ruling of the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court were to uphold our petition, it doesn't mean that we'll not do our legislative and oversight function. We'll continue to do that. We are going to Parliament. We will take part in the debates of Parliament. We'll do our oversight functions of Parliament. We'll do our legislative functions of Parliament to satisfy our constituents.
The letter signed by party chairman Jacob Echebilamte explains the decision is based on principles. It says, quote, reconciling our position to our local culture would be that if one is challenging the elevation of a paramount chief, one does not at the same time recognize such sub-chiefs as he may install, unquote. It indicates members of the NPP will be fully engaged in the work of Parliament. Quote, they will be involved in all legislative functions and assist in carrying out Parliament's oversight responsibility of the executive and public purse in the normal course of parliamentary business. NPP MPs will scrutinize and contribute to the making of the budget, study and help pass bills, and deliberate loan agreements and all financial transactions involving the state, unquote. But the NPP MPs will not be vetting the ministerial nominees because, according to Mr. Echebilamte, quote, the minister's role is to assist the president in the performance of his functions, and since the legitimacy of the president's position is under challenge at the Supreme Court, participating in their vetting would be contradictory to the challenge, unquote.
And still on the Appointments Committee, 4 ministers designate nominated by President John Dramani Mahama have been vetted by the Appointments Committee of Parliament. The 4 representing the Information, Roads and Highways, Agric and Lands and Natural Resources ministries were grilled on the knowledge of the respective ministries, their competencies and the mission and vision statements of the various agencies and departments under those ministries. Each member designate spent an average of 2 hours answering questions from members of the Appointments Committee.
The first person to appear before the committee was the Minister-designate for the Roads and Highways Ministry, Alhaji Amin Amidu Suleimani. Key among the questions asked the minister was how the road fund could be used to help in Ghana's road construction efforts and how road contractors could be promptly paid after completion of their work.
Mr. Chairman, I want to start by saying that the road fund decentralization might not be favorable now, in that roads are not district specific. Roads link districts, link regions, And if we decide to centralize it and it has to construction, and the other districts are unable to link up, the roads may not even be able to, you won't be able to move between districts and between regions. So I'm a fan of decentralization because I've done most of my political work in the region. But I think that for the road fund, I think it will be unadvisable at this point to decentralize. We haven't got that capacity now to be able to synchronize so that if Garu is working towards Boku, Boku should be working, then you will link up. So that's why the road fund has a mandate to start from Boku to Garu, but it goes across the street. So I will not favor any decentralization of it now.
The competency of the minister-designate was also put in question. Samuel Okujetu Ablakwa.
Will you be kind to tell this committee what you think are the personal attributes you have that makes you best fit for Minister for Roads and Highways? Looking at your CV also, you are a mechanical engineer, and this is an industry dominated by civil engineers. I would want to know from you whether you consider that a disadvantage or rather an advantage which can help you in the discharge of your duties.
By saying I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm going to the road sector where it's basically they're all civil. I would say that if I were even in practice at my level, we don't do engineering, we do management. And all those people at my level in the engineering sector are managers. They don't do drawings and other things. Engineering is a tool for management. It's not a tool for drawing and other things. Those who draw are there. Once you become an engineer, you're a manager, and you can fit into anything, whether civil, geodetic, electrical, because basically, we start engineering with the basic training. In those days that we were trained as engineers, we all did the same course, basically in the first year before we moved. But I'm not going there as an engineer, and I will not profess that I am going there as an engineer. I'm going to Ministry of Roads and Highways, basically as a manager, not as an engineer.
Alhaji Suleimani also promised to enhance the capacity of local contractors by ensuring members enroll into the ministry's training school, whilst helping them to acquire machinery and equipment to enhance their work if given the nod. The next person to appear before the appointments committee was the minister-designate for the Food and Agricultural Ministry, Clement Kofi Humado. He immediately brought his expertise to bear as to how he would ensure food security in the country and assist local farmers have access to fertilizer to help increase their productivity.
Try to aggregate livestock, particularly cattle, into confined areas. We need to demarcate special areas according to our land use for cattle and zone them so that cattle should not stray into crop producing areas. And I'm aware that a project is being started somewhere in the Kwewu area where Yawawase, to develop 245 hectares of fodder pasture for cattle farmers. I think this needs to be encouraged, and when given the nod, we will look at other areas of this country where this threat exists.
On poultry, Clement Kofi Humado noted it will help improve poultry farming in the country by identifying commercial farmers and outgrowers to plant yellow corn on large bases for the poultry farmers.
Yellow corn, soybean. It is an area, when given the nod, I will engage NAPCO and its stakeholders. I think so far, from my examination, the model is right, and NAPCO is doing well, but they need to be assisted to expand. They need to increase their coverage all over the country in terms of warehousing, silos, drying facilities. And we need to make the LBCs, the local buying companies, more efficient.
He also promised to engage the youth prominently in the agri sector.
Meanwhile, Minister of Information designate Mahama Ayarga has promised to make the Ministry of Information the central coordination point for the dissemination of all government information to media and the public. Touching on the media fund, the minister designate promised to use the fund to build the capacity of media personnel both in the private and public sectors.
Starting the matter, the whole essence of media pluralism is to create space for divergent opinion. Some opinion will be very critical, others complementary, but that's the essence of the constitutional commitments that we have made to ourselves. So I think that first and foremost, there's very little you can do about the right of some media houses to have a critical opinion of government. The important thing is to make sure that government side of the story is always out there. It is truthful, it is accurate, and it is enough to serve the needs of the populace.
Mahama Ayariga also promised to resource the Ghana News Agency, the Information Services Department, the Ghana Publishing Company Limited, and the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation when given the nod as the substantive Minister of Information. He also indicated that he was perturbed by constant change of ministers at the Information Ministry, noting that he would try to understand as much as possible what the President needs from him in order to do accordingly. Minister-designate for the Land and Natural Resources Ministry, Alhaji Inusa Fuseni, who also appeared before the Appointments Committee, first indicated that he will take a detailed survey and assessment of the land situation in the country, especially in order to address serious issues relating to land demarcation in the country.
Look at our town and country planning policy to ensure that zoning is done for purposes that could support industries, that could support agriculture, that could support residential activities, and pursue the enforcement of the zoning regulations vigorously. That is the way to go, and that is the way I will go if given the nod.
He also reiterated his commitment to make small-scale mining the total reserve of Ghanaians. Alhaji Fuseni gave the assurance that government will continue with the Accra Land Redevelopment Policy devoid of abuses, and it will be done in a transparent manner.
Some political parties have expressed satisfaction with proceedings at Parliament's Appointments Committee so far, despite the boycott of NPP MPs. They, however, say the presence of the minority leaders, however, would have enhanced the process.
The vetting process, which started yesterday, continues. 7 ministerial nominees have so far been vetted, despite a boycott by the 13 NPP minority members on the Appointments Committee. The other political parties say they are satisfied with the proceedings so far.
You know, most of the people who have appeared so far have been ministers in their own right. And so the questions are not particularly, anything difficult or challenging. They are fairly rudimentary. I guess, it's also their majority party asking its own ministers questions. So maybe, I suppose, nobody is going to anticipate that it's going to be too difficult. But, historically, the vetting process hasn't been anything, really too difficult for the ministers.
Comparing what happened yesterday to that which took place in the previous years, it is clear that this is a significant improvement. And so the party is happy in relation to the fact that there is an improvement. Notwithstanding, there were some few things that took place that we thought, as a party, that given the importance of the vetting committee, they should have known and should have done better.
But the PPP had reservations about the formation of the Appointments Committee.
Now, you have ministers sitting on the Appointment Committee. So is there an executive scrutiny of the executive or what? So this arrangement of Parliament having to exercise oversight responsibility over the executive, for me, is a mockery of the whole concept of separation of powers.
The MPP MP's boycott of the vetting process is based on a position that taking part would be a recognition of the legitimacy of President John Mahama, whose electoral win is the focus of an ongoing election petition at the Supreme Court. The other political parties, however, say their absence has been insignificant, but it would have been better for Ghana's democracy if they had turned up.
People in this country would have rather they were there. Perhaps that could have made for a little bit more rigorous questioning, but to a large extent, their absence may not make a difference. But I think for them as a party, they need to really assess their situation as to whether they are part and parcel of Ghana's democracy.
They also expect the ministers to deliver.
Joynews has learned of some interventions by government to stave off a threatened strike by members of the National Association of Graduate Teachers. NAGRAT President Christian Adaipoku has confirmed the association's leaders, together with their NAT counterparts, met with the Chief of Staff Prosper Bani earlier today over their scheduled strike, which was to have started next Monday, January 28th. NAGRAT had demanded that government resolve all outstanding disputes regarding their salaries and other conditions of service by close of day today. Reports, however, say the meeting resolved that a high-level working group be established to address the problems. Moving away from that, Kwejo Boateng, the suspect who attempted slashing of the throat of a 6-year-old boy barely a fortnight ago at Volivo near Esuchari in the eastern region, is due to appear before the Odumasi Circuit Court on January 31st. His plea was not taken at his initial appearance on January 17th. Meanwhile, Joynews checks has confirmed his victim was discharged from hospital last Friday and is in good health. Walalom Johnson has the rest of the story.
Unlike a little over a week ago when our news team visited him at the hospital, this is how refreshing little Ima looks when we met him at his dad's shop in Asuchari. He told me he is aspiring to be a medical doctor. The stitches around his neck are due to be removed on 25th January.
I know the day was Sunday, so adult people were all in church, leaving some small kids playing around the back of my house. So as I heard a noise, then opened my door and then rushed to the scene. I just saw the little kids over there, and I asked for Pascal. He said he fled into the bush. So I also followed Yima to the hospital with a motorbike. And then later at the hospital at Akuse, when I questioned what happened to him, he told me he was passing through the corridor to the kitchen to fetch water to drink when Pascal called him by the nickname they have been calling each other. Then he also responded. Then the guy immediately grabbed him, started slashing his throat with the bread knife.
What would you say saved him?
I may say it's God. It's God that saved him. Because and then secondly, if he has used real knife, I'm sure he would have killed my son. But because he used a bread knife, and maybe, I think when he was doing it, he was also scared. Then leaving the boy there, then fled into the bush.
What do you want to become in future?
I want to become a doctor.
I was curious to know the exact location of that gory incident barely 2 weeks ago. The boy pointed out to the spot where his head was nearly chopped off. The suspect is a tenant in Francis' house, but the circumstances surrounding the mind-boggling scenario compelled me to ask for his abode within the house. An unlocked, stinking, messy room I was showed. The incident took place on a quiet Sunday with no one at home except victim and suspect. The victim managed to sneak out, screaming his lungs out. This drew the attention of a Class 6 pupil of Lano Presby Primary, who rushed him to the hospital on a motorbike.
We hear you played the role of a good Samaritan on the day of incident. What exactly happened? What can you tell us?
I'm on the way, and the boy came, and he told me that someone is cutting his head. And he said, and I told him, who's man? And he said, Pascal, and some boy, Philemon, he catch it and put it on the motor. and I took her to the hospital before we saw his father coming. And he came to the hospital and told us that, is it you who brought him? And I said yes.
Currently in remand at Akuse prison, Kwadwo Boateng, popularly called Apaska, will appear before Dumasi Circuit Court on Thursday, 31st January.
That was an amazing story. To see that one life has been saved, for me, is truly amazing. Moving away from that, the board of directors of the Kolebu Teaching Hospital says it is receiving threats from some dismissed employees of the hospital and their allies. The issue of the threats came up at a news briefing to reveal ongoing restructuring processes at the hospital.
In the wake of the dismissal of former Director of Administration, some allies are calling for his reinstatement. At a press briefing Friday afternoon, Board Chairman Edward Annan showed pressmen some of the threats that the board has been receiving from some of the dismissed employees. Other members also confirmed some of these threats.
They called me personally to threaten me. So they write all kinds of stories about me to just tarnish my image because I had done one thing.
The board chairman also debunked allegations that the hospital had taken delivery of expired drugs.
It was true that there was a consignment which had expired delivered to Kolebu, but Kolebu didn't order it. Kolebu didn't pay for it. And the supplier was made aware of that. The supplier came back and took the items away. It's different if after going through the investigation, it was clear that Kolebu ordered those items knowing that they were expired, asserted them expired and put in the stores. Then of course Kolebu has done something wrong.
Meanwhile, the board of directors say the hospital is undergoing a restructuring process, one of which is a computerized system which makes for easy flow of information. And a 3-member committee has been formed to audit the different units in the hospital to bring out some of their fraudulent deals.
That system, we all, including the government, we all know and believe that it has to be done for us to have a smooth run of the institution. Now, we found so many orders placed without authority from the chief executive. Now, that's completely wrong. All these hamper the smooth running of Kolebu.
Board members say by close of day, it will file a report with the police.
And in business, global tech producer Samsung has placed Ghana as one of its priority markets in Africa for 2013. Nigeria and Kenya remain Samsung's biggest markets on the continent in terms of volumes, but Ghana's recent performance in volume compared to other African countries has attracted the attention of the company. According to Samsung, recent surveys show it is the market leader in phones in Ghana, #1 value market share in smartphones, particularly TV and air conditions. The company has significantly increased operational activities in the country in terms of presence, advertising and sales. It has also hinted of some new major projects in Ghana, South Africa and Nigeria. Some of these include the mobile fan zone, which was developed for the 2013 African Cup of Nations, but expected to continue after the tournament. Samsung will also next month start the Chelsea Dream the Blues that will provide kids with global opportunities in football in Ghana, Nigeria, and in South Africa. We'll take a breather here. Please don't go too far away. I'll be right back.
Get a Digibox now. Visit us on www.multitvworld.com or call 0302 211 68025 for a multi-TV accredited dealer.
Welcome back. You're still watching the nightly news on your Joynews channel with me, Marian Toure. Moving on into international news. Egyptian opposition supporters are gathering in central Cairo to mark 2 years since the start of the uprising that swept Hosni Mubarak from power. Police clashes with the opponents of President Mohamed Morsi, who are now converging on Tahrir Square.
Opposition supporters began converging in Tahrir Square on Friday morning. Some protesters have erected checkpoints to verify the identities of people passing through. Others have set up an exhibition of photographs of those killed in protests over the past 2 years. The roads leading from Tahrir Square to several nearby government buildings and foreign embassies have been blocked by concrete walls since last November. Demonstrators tried to dismantle one of them on Thursday night, but a new wall was built to block entry to the cabinet headquarters. There are clashes in Alexandria and Suez. In Ismaila, protesters set fire to the Muslim Brotherhood Party headquarters. Critics accuse Morsi of betraying the revolution. He denies this and has appealed for calm. An appeals court recently overturned Mubarak's life sentence over the deaths of protesters and ordered a retrial. The 84-year-old former leader remains in detention at a military hospital.
And to the lighter side of the news, the state and style of women's hair has always been a hot topic. But one can conveniently say that 2012 was all about embracing, nurturing and transitioning to curly coifs or kinky froze. Ghanaian women now have embraced the idea of keeping their natural hair. But what has informed their decision to go natural? For many, it is for the sake of convenience, and for others, it is the joy of keeping healthy hair which will not fall apart easily.
Fashions come, go, make 360 degrees and come right back again. Clothes and jewelry and hair that were all the rage in one decade become unfashionable after a while. But keep them around for a couple of decades and you can whip them out again with a nip here and a tuck there, of course. Down memory lane, it was the pride of the Ghanaian woman to plait their hair with a black thread and style it in very unique and interesting ways. In the last 4 decades, a trip to the hair salon has been a trendy practice made necessary by the relaxed hair Ghanaian woman. And this trend caught on so much that most Ghanaian women had their hair permed. If you saw any woman with her natural kinky hair, then you could be sure she was in a school or belonged to a particular religion that frowned on artificial hair. Last year, there was a craze among the Ghanaian women of keeping their hair natural. One wonders if it is another fashion gimmick as usual, or this will really stay for good. Well, most of the women we spoke with said they found it convenient to maintain their hair natural.
I was fed up because I was getting burns and cuts, from the relaxer. So I decided to cut my hair and then try the natural thing. And it has worked well for me.
Looks like the natural hair craze is almost becoming a movement. Well, some women have really gone the extra mile to make sure that all women who keep their hair natural find it very convenient and comfortable. That is encouraging. There was a natural products bazaar held to create the awareness that going natural is healthier and suitable. Kwakwa is an entrepreneur who also manages a natural hair salon. She tells us why she is into everything natural.
Knowing that I don't have to go through the pain of using the chemical products, knowing that my hair grows well. It doesn't break, it doesn't go through the things that I had experienced with the permed hair. And also knowing that my friends and family and boyfriend appreciate natural hair. So
some of the women who are keeping their hair natural also tell us how appropriate it has been for them. And the men, how do they feel about the women who keep their hair natural? Stay tuned, we will bring you their reaction in our subsequent stories.
The nightly news ends on that note, but before we go, let's take a look at the headlines again. The ministers designate for roads and highways, agriculture, information and lands and natural resources took their turns today to answer questions from members of the Appointments Committee. Meanwhile, the MP stayed away again today, insists it will not rescind its boycott. Nagrat has called off a strike planned for Monday after a meeting at the castle today, where the Chief of Staff established a working group to address their concerns. In business, global tech producer Samsung has placed Ghana as one of its priority markets in Africa. Egyptian opposition supporters gathered in central Cairo to mark 2 years since the start of an uprising that swept Hosni Mubarak from power. And that is where we end it finally for tonight. If you want more news, please log on to myjoyonline.com/news or multitvworld.com/news. As always, my name is Marian Toure, and please join the usual suspects for Newsfile tomorrow. Good night.